Welcome to the deep dive. You know the drill by now. We take these dense, complex, strategic documents, the ones promising a whole new way to succeed, and we distill them down into the clearest, most valuable insights for you.
And today, we are really tackling a huge one. For the last 50 years or so, business strategy has pretty much been defined by one thing: competition. Beating your rivals, fighting for market share.
Right, fighting over the existing pie.
Exactly. But the material we're looking at today suggests that this entire paradigm might be, well, outdated.
Yeah.
That it actually leads a lot of companies into these strategic dead ends.
Absolutely. So our deep dive today is all about the logic of creating brand new, uncontested market space. The concept is formalized, and you've probably heard of it, as blue ocean strategy.
And our mission here is to show you that this isn't just some, high-level theory for a handful of genius inventors. There are clear, practical, analytical tools and principles that can allow any manager to really formulate and execute this kind of strategy.
Systematic, that's the key.
It is. We're trying to move beyond the abstract so you can see precisely how you can generate rapid, profitable growth by essentially making your competition irrelevant.
That's the promise, right? We are leaving the world of just be a little bit better and giving you the framework for be fundamentally different.
Sure.
So let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack the core idea here. The entire premise, which is pretty radical when you think about it, is that traditional strategy, what they call the red ocean, is just becoming a losing game.
It is. It's failing to deliver that sustainable high profit growth. And that observation is based on really three big economic realities that are shaping business right now.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, history just shows us there are no permanently excellent companies or even industries. The leader from yesterday is, often tomorrow's cautionary tale.
Right. And second, and I think this is so important, is that in this globalized world, supply now exceeds demand in more and more industries. Yes, you're fighting for scraps of an existing market. And the third piece of that is globalization itself, the way information spreads. It just eliminates those cozy little knee monopolies that companies used to be able to hide in.
Yeah, that's gone. If you invent something brilliant, you can bet 10 competitors in 3 different countries will have a version of it inside of a year.
And what do all three of those things lead to? It's accelerated commoditization. Just think about it. Cell phones, detergents, cars, they're all converging. The brands are becoming more and more similar.
And when everything is basically the same, where does the customer look?
Price.
Price. They stop caring about the brand crest versus Colgate, whatever, and they just pick the one that's on sale that week.
Exactly. And that just kicks off this downward spiral of price wars, shrinking profits, and this whole existing market space. This is what the authors call the red ocean.
The name is pretty vivid. The competition turns the water bloody.
It does. And I found this statistic just staggering. Almost 9 out of 10 new business launches, like 86% of them, are focused on this red ocean space.
Okay, but here's the kicker, right?
Here's the kicker. Those 9 out of 10 launches, they only account for about 62% of total revenues and a mere 39% of total profits.
Wow. So companies are just pouring resources into the most crowded, least profitable part of the whole economy.
That's the strategic misalignment. So the question becomes, why keep fighting in this bloody saturated water when you could be looking somewhere else entirely? And that right there is the pivot point. Blue oceans. They represent all the industries that are not in existence today. It's the uncontested market space that's just waiting to be created.
I mean, historically, that's where the real growth comes from, right? The car industry, the first personal computers, things like that.
Exactly. So if red ocean strategy is all about competing in existing space and, making that trade-off, you either choose high value or you choose low cost.
What's the fundamental difference with a blue ocean strategy?
It breaks that core dogma. It's about creating uncontested space, creating new demand, and pursuing differentiation and low cost at the same time. You're not playing by the existing rules. You're actually rewriting them.
Okay, but hang on. How is that even possible? I mean, every business textbook I've ever read says high differentiation comes at a higher cost. If you're offering better value and a lower price, aren't you just stuck in the middle, satisfying no one?
That is the conventional wisdom. And that's exactly the dogma that this idea of value innovation is designed to break.
Value innovation.
It's the strategic logic that makes the competition irrelevant. And it forces a company to put equal weight on two things: a leap in value for the buyers and a leap for the company itself through a lower cost structure.
I'm still trying to get my head around that paradox. Usually innovation means more R&D, better materials, which means higher cost. How can innovation drive costs down?
Because value innovation is not the same thing as tech innovation. It's about strategic innovation focused on utility. When you really reconstruct what buyers value, you often find the industry has been over-investing in things that drive up cost, but don't really add much value anymore.
Ah, so you're saying you eliminate those expensive, frustrating things,
Yeah.
and that gives you the money to invest in new, high-value things that nobody else is even thinking about. And that's how you get both better value and a lower cost base.
Precisely. It's a system for asking, what should we just get rid of from the old model, and what new things should we add? And that's what frees you from that value-cost trade-off.
Okay, this sounds brilliant in theory, but, theories often fall apart when you try to actually do them. So how do managers who are trained their whole careers to benchmark against rivals, how do they actually visualize this? How do you make it concrete?
They start with a tool called the strategy canvas. This is really the central analytical tool of the whole framework. It does two things. First, it diagnoses the current state of play in an industry.
Okay, like a snapshot.
Exactly. And second, it acts as a visual guide, an action framework for charting where you want to go next.
So how does it work? What are you actually mapping on this canvas?
Okay, just imagine a simple line graph. On the horizontal axis, you list all the key factors an industry competes on, things like price, features, customer service, performance, you name it.
Okay.
Then on the vertical axis, you measure the level of offering, from low to high, that buyers get for each of those factors. When you plot your company's performance across all those points and connect them, you get what's called your value curve.
And the real power, I'm guessing, is when you plot your competitors' curves right on top of yours.
You've got it. If your curve basically mirrors your rivals, with maybe a few small bumps here and there, you immediately have visual proof that you are stuck in that red ocean.
You're just a Me Too business.
Right. But just having a different curve isn't enough. A proposed strategy, a new value curve, it has to pass 3 really tough tests to be commercially viable.
Litmus test. I like that. What's the first one?
The first one is focus. A winning value curve doesn't try to be everything to everybody. If you try to deliver a high level on too many factors,
Your costs just balloon.
your costs balloon, and
Yeah.
your whole business model gets way too complex. You have to be disciplined about what you choose not to do.
That's hard, though. That means deliberately being worse than your competitors on some things.
It does. The second test is divergence. If your new curve is just a little bit higher or a little bit lower than your competitors, you haven't really created anything new. A true blue ocean curve has to stand radically apart. It can't be reactive.
And the third one, I love this one because it forces you to be simple. A compelling tagline.
Yes. If you can't easily explain what makes your offering unique, your strategy is probably too complicated or it just doesn't make sense.
It has to capture the value and the cost proposition in one breath. Like the example they always use is Southwest Airlines in the early days.
The speed of a plane at the price of a car.
Exactly. It's brilliant. It instantly tells the buyer what they're getting, the high value of speed and the low cost of driving. If your strategy can't be boiled down to that kind of clarity, you're probably in trouble. Okay, so the strategy canvas shows us we're stuck, our curve looks like everyone else's. Now we get to the really interesting part. How do you systematically change that curve to get the focus and divergence you need?
The answer is the 4 actions framework. This is the engine, really, for reconstructing buyer value. It's a set of 4 questions that forces you to challenge every single assumption the industry competes on.
And it's so elegant. The first 2 actions are all about cutting costs, right?
Pretty much-
Dropping that unnecessary baggage.
Exactly. You start with eliminate. You have to ask which factors that our industry has competed on for years, sometimes for decades, should be eliminated entirely because they just don't add real value to buyers anymore.
You're challenging the sacred cows.
You are. Then the second question is reduce. Which factors should be reduced well below the industry standard? These are the areas where companies have, over-engineered their products in the race to one-up the competition, and it's driving up cost for no real reason.
So those first 2 actions, eliminate and reduce, they create the savings that let you do the next 2.
Precisely. They fund the value leap. The third action is raise. Which factors should be raised well above the industry standard? These are the points of compromise, the things that really frustrate customers about the current offerings.
And finally, the most exciting one, create.
Create. Which entirely new factors, things the industry has never even offered, should be created. This is where you get true divergence, where you can attract a whole new set of customers who weren't even in the market before.
So by doing the first 2, you slash your cost structure. And by doing the last 2, you lift buyer value and create new demand. And doing all 4 at once is how you get that value innovation, high value and low cost.
And the classic definitive case study for this is Cirque du Soleil. I mean, they were looking at the traditional circus industry, which was, let's be honest, a dying industry.
Oh, absolutely. Declining audiences, profits were falling, they were competing with video games, movies.
And the big player was Ringling Brothers. And every other circus was just a cheaper, maybe a less spectacular version of Ringling. Cirque didn't try to beat them. They went after a totally different audience.
Right. They targeted adults and corporate clients, people who were willing to pay a much higher ticket price for a completely different kind of experience.
So let's look at how they used the framework. To fund their big ideas, they needed to cut costs drastically. So they started with eliminate and reduce.
Okay, so what did they eliminate?
First, the animal shows. That was a huge cost center. Training, housing, insurance, not to mention the growing public unease about it. Gone.
And the star performers, too?
Star performers. Gone. I mean, in an age of Hollywood movie stars, a famous trapeze artist just doesn't have the same pull, but they're still very expensive. They also reduced the traditional three-ring format down to a single stage.
Which makes sense. The three-ring circus is chaotic. You don't know where to look.
Exactly. It creates audience anxiety, and it means you need 3 times as many performers. By focusing on one stage, they cut their performer costs and focus the audience's attention.
Okay, but I have to stop you there. If you're an investor and someone comes to you and says, I have a great idea for a new circus,
Yeah.
we're getting rid of the animals and the star performers. I mean, isn't that literally the definition of a circus? How did they sell that?
That is the perfect question. And the answer is, in the other half of the framework, the raise and create. They used those massive cost savings to deliver a new value proposition that was so compelling, the old audience just didn't care about the missing pieces.
So what did they raise?
They raised the quality of the venue itself. The tent became this luxurious, comfortable, almost magical space, not sawdust and hard benches. They also raised the level of the clowns, shifting from simple slapstick to this sophisticated artistic humor that appealed to adults.
And then they created things that a circus had never had before.
They created a unifying theme and a storyline, like a piece of theater. They created artistic music and dance. And maybe most importantly, they created multiple productions.
So you could go back again and again?
Exactly. It created repeat customers, something the old circus model could never do. And if you look at their value curve, it's just a completely different shape. Ringling is high on animals and star power. Cirque is at 0 on those, but it spikes way up on artistic merit, comfort, and storyline. They create a whole new art form.
Okay, let's try a different red ocean. The U.S. wine industry. Before Yellowtail, I mean, that market was just a nightmare of choice.
It was a $20 billion industry, intensely competitive, and the conventional wisdom was all about terroir, oak, tannins, complexity. The whole industry was just obsessed with one-upping each other on those factors.
In Casella Wines, the company that created Yellowtail, they just ignored all of that.
They're completely. They didn't look at their wine competitors. They looked at the alternatives, beer, spirits, ready-to-drink cocktails. And they looked at the millions of Americans who drank that stuff instead of wine.
The non-customers, what did they find out about them?
They found that, to the mass market, wine was intimidating. It was pretentious, it was confusing to pick out a bottle. People felt stupid talking to a sommelier. The very things the industry was competing on were actually barriers to purchase for most people.
So they completely reframed the problem. They weren't trying to make a better wine. They were trying to make a fun, easy social drink.
That's the huge mental shift. And you can see the 4 actions at work again. They eliminated or reduced almost everything to do with complexity. They cut their variety down to just 2 options to start, one red, one white.
Which must have simplified their whole business.
Oh, massively. From production to inventory. They also got rid of all the wine snobbery. No technical jargon on the label, no talk about aging potential.
And they changed the taste itself.
They stripped out the heavy tannins and oak flavors and created a sweeter, fruit-forward profile that was immediately appealing to people used to sodas and cocktails.
Okay, so that's the cost side. What was the value leap? What did they raise and create?
They created easy drinking, which was that flavor profile. They created easy selection, the simple label, the kangaroo, only 2 choices on the shelf. And they created a feeling of fun and adventure with that bold Australian personality.
They basically said, don't worry about it, just grab the one with the kangaroo. It's so simple, but it takes real strategic courage to do that.
It does. And the result was incredible. Yellowtail became the fastest-growing wine brand in U.S. history. They priced it above the cheap budget wines, but critically, they grew by converting beer and cocktail drinkers. not by stealing customers from other wineries.
The amazing thing about these examples is that they don't feel like just random luck. There's a system behind them. And you mentioned earlier that companies get stuck because they define their industry in one specific way. The next set of tools, the Six Paths framework, is meant to shatter that thinking.
That's exactly right. The six paths are these structured ways to challenge all the assumptions an industry just takes for granted. If you're stuck competing on tiny feature improvements, it's because you've accepted a very narrow definition of your world.
So this isn't just about spotting a gap in the market. It's about retraining your brain to look at the same data everyone else has, but from a totally new perspective.
Right. Let's start with path one. Look across alternative industries. Alternatives are products or services that have different forms but accomplish the same basic objective. A restaurant and a movie theater are in different industries, but they're alternatives for a nice night out.
Let's use the NetJets example. They were looking at corporate travel, and the alternatives were what? Owning your own corporate jet.
Which is maximum convenience, but insane fixed costs.
Or flying commercial first class, which is a lower fixed cost, but just a huge hassle.
So NetJets created their blue ocean by asking, what if we could combine the best of both and eliminate the worst? They got rid of the massive fixed cost of ownership by offering fractional ownership. You buy a share of a jet, which gets you, say, 50 hours of flight time a year.
So they lowered the financial barrier.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
But they kept the best parts of private jet travel. The point-to-point service, access to thousands of small airports, getting from your car to take off in minutes, not hours. They gave commercial flyers the core benefits of private flight.
And the same logic applies to that NTT Docomo iMode example in Japan, right?
It does. The alternatives were the internet powerful, but complex, stationary, and people were afraid of using credit cards online. And the cell phone, which was simple, mobile, but had very limited data.
So Docomo just mashed them together.
Yeah. Well, they cherry-picked the best of each. They offered the killer apps of the internet, email, news, games, but they delivered it with the simplicity and mobility of the phone. And the real genius was the billing. Everything just went on your one monthly phone bill.
Which eliminated that huge friction point of paying for things online.
Exactly. They created enormous value just by solving the frustration between the two alternatives.
Okay, so that's path one. Path two is about looking across strategic groups within an industry.
Right. Strategic groups are just companies that follow a similar strategy, usually ranked by price and performance. In cars, you have the luxury brands, the family sedans, the budget compacts. The key is to figure out why customers trade up or down between those groups.
The fitness industry is a great example. You had the big, expensive, full-service health clubs on one end.
High price, high performance. And then on the other end, you had cheap home exercise programs. Low price, low performance.
And Curves, the fitness chain, they targeted the huge group of women who avoided both. They didn't like the big gyms. They were intimidating, time-consuming.
The whole lumps in leotards anxiety, as they call it.
Right. But home exercise was isolating and easy to quit. So Curbs built a blue ocean by fusing the best of both.
They took the supervised community feel of a health club, but they offered it at the price point and convenience of a home program. They did that with a women-only 30-minute circuit workout using simple, safe hydraulic machines.
And the business model was completely different, too.
Totally. The startup costs were incredibly low, maybe $30,000, and they could operate out of a tiny 1,500 square foot space in a suburban strip mall. That low-cost structure let them offer a service that solved the core problems of both of the existing strategic groups.
Okay, path three. This one challenges who you even think of as your customer. Look across the chain of buyers.
Yeah, in a lot of sales, you have the person who uses the product, the person who pays for it, and maybe a person who influences the decision. Most industries get fixated on just one of them.
Like the Novo Nordisk insulin example. The pharma industry for decades was obsessed with the influencer, the doctor.
And doctors cared about one thing: scientific purity. So the insulin kept getting purer and purer, but the experience for the actual patient was still awful.
So Novo Nordisk just flipped their focus entirely to the user, the person with diabetes.
They realized that for the user, taking insulin was a hassle. It was complicated, it was socially awkward, carrying around vials and syringes.
And their big innovation was the insulin pen.
The Novo pen. It made the whole process simple, discreet, and convenient. And even if some doctors argued a syringe was technically more precise, the massive leap in user convenience was what mattered. The user's preference drove the market.
Bloomberg did the same thing with financial data, but they flipped it the other way. The industry was focused on the purchaser.
The IT managers.
Yeah.
And IT managers just wanted cheap, standardized systems that were easy to manage.
But Bloomberg ignored them and focused on the user, the traders, and analysts on the floor.
They knew traders value speed and instant analysis above all else. So they built this incredibly powerful, easy-to-use system with dual monitors and dedicated keyboards. It saved traders seconds, which could mean millions of dollars.
And the traders loved it so much that they basically forced their IT departments to buy these expensive, non-standard systems.
They did. Bloomberg understood the power dynamics. They even built in little concierge services like ordering flowers or booking travel right into the terminal to make it even more indispensable to the user.
Okay, so the next three paths also give you these structural ways to rethink your industry. Path 4 is about looking at complementary products and services.
Right. Most companies define their product too narrowly. This path makes you ask what happens before, during, and after someone uses your product. The biggest pain point might not be your product at all.
The example of the British kettle is perfect. The kettles worked fine, but people in the UK hated getting limescale from the hard water in their tea.
And the kettle makers all said, that's a water problem, not our problem. Until Philips.
What did they do?
They just put a simple little filter in the spout of the kettle. It cost pennies, but it solved the customer's total problem. They didn't innovate the heating element, they innovated the experience, and sales just exploded.
Path 5 challenges the industry's whole appeal. Is it functional or is it emotional?
Yeah, you can create a blue ocean by flipping that. Take QB House in Japan. The traditional barber shop was a very emotional, hour-long ritual with hot towels and massages.
And they turned it into something purely functional.
A 10-minute, 1,000 yen haircut. They even invented an air wash vacuum to get rid of the cut hair so they didn't need sinks. They targeted business people who just wanted a quick, cheap, efficient haircut.
And you can go the other way, too. Cemex took a purely functional product cement and made it emotional.
They did. In Mexico, for poor families, building a new room onto their house was this huge dream. Cemex created a savings club called Patrimonio Hoy, which means Patrimony Today, that helped families save, provided technical advice, and delivered the materials. They turned buying cement into the emotional act of building a dream.
And finally, path 6. Look at shaping external trends over time.
This is about spotting a trend that is decisive, irreversible, and has a clear trajectory, not a fad. And then asking how you can ride that trend to offer something totally new.
Apple and iTunes is the textbook case. The trend was clearly the move to digital music. The music industry was just fighting it.
They were. But Apple looked at the user's pain points. People hated buying a whole CD for one song. The quality of illegal downloads was often bad.
So Apple created a solution that fixed everything. A legal, easy way to buy single songs for 99 cents with high quality, all integrated with the iPod. They didn't invent digital music, but they created the blue ocean by making it simple, legal, and valuable.
Okay, so you've used the paths, you've used the framework, and you have this brilliant idea. But formulation is really only half the battle. A great idea can be totally sunk by a bad business model.
This is where the execution risk really comes in.
It does. And that's why they have what's called the Blue Ocean Idea, or BOI, index. It's a sequence of 4 tests to check if your idea is commercially viable. And you have to pass them in order: utility, price, cost, and adoption.
The first hurdle is utility. Does your product actually offer exceptional value? Does it remove the biggest roadblocks for buyers?
And this is where so many companies fall into the technology trap. They get so obsessed with how clever their new tech is that they forget to make it useful.
The example of the Philips CDI, the imagination machine, is perfect. It could do everything. Play videos, music, games.
But because it tried to do everything, it did nothing well. Customers were just confused. They couldn't figure out why they needed it.
Contrast that with the Ford Model T. It wasn't the first car, but it passed the utility test because it was durable enough for the terrible dirt roads of the time, and it was simple enough that a farmer could fix it themselves. It delivered utility.
Once you've nailed utility, the second hurdle is price. And this is tough. How do you price something that has no direct competition? The temptation is just to price it high.
Which is a huge mistake, apparently.
It is, especially for ideas that rely on network effects or volume. The price has to be set from the start to attract the mass of buyers.
So how do you figure out what that price should be?
You use what they call the price corridor of the mass. You don't benchmark against your non-existent competitors. You benchmark against the alternatives. For the Model T, the alternative wasn't another car. It was a horse and buggy, which cost about $400.
So Ford priced the Model T at $850. More expensive, but in the same ballpark. It was recognizably affordable.
Right. And once you've set that strategic price, you move to the third hurdle, cost. You can't use traditional cost plus pricing. You have to use price minus.
Strategic price minus your desired profit margin equals your target cost.
And if that target cost looks impossible, you have to get creative. You can streamline your operations, like Ford did with the assembly line. You can partner with other companies to fill in gaps.
Or you can innovate on the pricing model itself.
Exactly. Like Blockbuster. They didn't sell videos for $80, they rented them for a few dollars. Or NetJets, using the timeshare model. You change the transaction itself to meet the target cost.
And the final hurdle, which might be the trickiest, is adoption. Getting your own people, your partners, and the public to buy in.
You have to plan for resistance from day one. When Merrill Lynch just announced an online brokerage, their own brokers freaked out and the stock tanked. You have to address those fears up front.
And you have to educate the public, too. The Monsanto case with GMO foods is a classic example of failing that hurdle.
It's a devastating cautionary tale. They let other people control the narrative, and they faced massive public opposition that they never recovered from. You have to anticipate the fears and neutralize them before they can take root.
So even if you have a perfect idea that passes all those tests, you still have to actually implement it inside a real organization with all its inertia and politics.
And this is where you hit the four big organizational hurdles. Cognitive, getting people to even see the need for change. Resource, doing it with a limited budget. Motivational, getting them to act. And political, overcoming the vested interests.
And the traditional approach to this takes forever and costs a fortune, but this framework pushes something called tipping point leadership.
Right. It's about focusing your energy on the things that have a disproportionate influence to create change quietly and cheaply. And the best case study for this is the turnaround of the NYPD in the 90s under Bill Bratton.
I mean, he walked into a disaster. Sky-high crime, a demoralized police force, and a frozen budget. So first, the cognitive hurdle. How did he get 36,000 cops to agree that things had to change?
He made them see reality. Instead of showing them statistics in a boardroom, he made his senior managers, the ones in comfortable offices, ride the subway, the electric sewer, so they could experience the fear and chaos that ordinary New Yorkers felt every single day.
That's brilliant. Experience is so much more powerful than a spreadsheet.
It is. Once they saw the problem, they couldn't unsee it. Next, the resource hurdle. With no new money, how do you execute a massive shift?
You focus on hot spots and cold spots.
Exactly. His data showed that most of the crime was happening in a few hotspot precincts. So he flooded those areas with resources, which instantly multiplied their effectiveness without costing more.
And the cold spots.
The cold spots were the low-impact activities that soaked up resources, like arresting someone, which took an officer 16 hours of paperwork. He created mobile processing centers, buses, that cut that time down dramatically, putting cops back on the street.
Okay, so people see the need, resources are focused. How do you tackle the motivational hurdle? How do you get a cynical organization to move fast?
You focus on the kingpins, the key influencers. For Bratton, that was his 76 precinct commanders. He figured if he could change their behavior, the whole organization would follow.
And you put them in a fishbowl.
The weekly CompStat meetings. He put up these big maps showing crime data for each precinct in color. Everyone could see who was succeeding and who was failing. It made performance transparent and public.
And the last one, the political hurdle. How do you deal with the powerful people who will inevitably try to block you?
You need a conciliere, a respected insider who knows where the bodies are buried, and you leverage your angels, the people who benefit most from the change, to protect you from the devils.
So Bratton got the mayor and the powerful newspapers on his side first.
He did. So when the courts and other groups tried to oppose his new focus on quality of life crimes, they found themselves politically isolated. The battle was already won. There is one final layer to all of this. To make execution stick, you need to build a culture of trust. And that comes from something called fair process.
This isn't about the outcome, right? It's about how you get there.
Exactly. Research shows that people are far more committed to a strategy, even one they don't fully agree with, if they feel the process used to create it was fair. And there are three principles to it.
The first is engagement. You have to actually involve people in the decisions that are going to affect them.
The second is explanation. You have to explain why the final decisions were made, even if you didn't take everyone's advice. People need to understand the rationale.
And third is expectation clarity. Everyone needs to know exactly what the new rules are, what the new goals are, and what the consequences are. No ambiguity.
When you do those three things, you get what they call intellectual and emotional recognition. People understand the logic and they feel respected. And that leads to voluntary cooperation, which is a world away from forced compliance.
There's that great example of the two manufacturing plants,
Yeah,
right?
Elco, the elevator company. At one plant, managers brought in senior consultants and just dropped a new plan on the employees with no explanation. The result was chaos, hostility, and resistance.
But at the other plant, they followed fair process. They explained the competitive threat, they engaged the employees in designing the new floor layout themselves, and they were clear about expectations.
And that plant, despite having a strong union, embraced the change willingly, and it became a massive success. Fair process is the glue that holds strategy and execution together.
We have covered a huge amount of ground. We've gone from the bloody red oceans of competition to the wide open blue oceans of new market space. We've given you the tools like the strategy canvas and the 6 paths.
And we've walked through that critical sequence for making an idea real utility, price, cost, and adoption, and then how to actually execute it using tipping point leadership and fair process.
And I think it's so important to remember that last insight. These breakthroughs, these blue oceans, they so often come from value innovation, not just pure technology. The Apple II wasn't the first PC.
But it was the first one that was easy to use. It connected the tech to a human value, which the first mover, the Altair 8800, just completely missed.
So creating a blue ocean gives you this incredible period of growth. But that leads to our final provocative thought for you to take away.
The hardest thing for a company that's already in a successful blue ocean, it's not creating that first one. It's recognizing the moment when competitors start to copy you, when their value curves start to look like yours again, and the water starts turning red.
Do you have the discipline, the vigilance to value innovate again before your current success becomes your own red ocean?
That's the real challenge.
And perhaps the most important lesson of all. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.